Say your name, the manager said, his voice just loud enough to make a few guests turn, just sharp enough to invite laughter, and the laughter came, soft at first, then spreading across the polished marble lobby like something practiced, something easy, something cruel. Daniel Hayes didn't look up right away, his hands still steady on the mop handle, the same hands that had tucked his daughter into bed just 6 hours earlier, the same hands that knew how to fix a leaking pipe, pack a school lunch, and hold a promise together when everything else had fallen apart. He lifted his head slowly, eyes calm, not proud, not broken, just quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't ask for attention but somehow commands it anyway. Daniel Hayes, he said, simple, clear, like a fact that didn't need decoration. A few snickers followed. That's it, someone muttered. No title, no story. The manager smirked wider, gesturing toward the gleaming floors and gold-trimmed pillars of the luxury hotel, a place where names usually came with weight, with power, with expectation. Just making sure we know who's responsible, he added, his tone light but edged, like a joke that only worked because someone else had to stand inside it. The air buzzed with quiet amusement, the clink of glasses, the low hum of conversations that had nothing to do with the man in the uniform. Daniel didn't respond. He didn't defend himself. He simply nodded once, as if accepting something far older than this moment, then returned his attention to the floor, the slow, deliberate motion of the mop cutting a clean path through reflections of chandeliers and expensive shoes. 2 sentences of silence followed, thick and unnoticed by most, but heavy enough to shift something in the room. Near the entrance, a black sedan had just pulled up, its door opening with quiet precision, and out stepped Victoria Sterling, CEO, her presence announced not by noise, but by the way conversations subtly paused, by the way staff straightened, by the way the room adjusted itself around her without being told. Her heels clicked against the marble, measured, confident, each step carrying years of decisions, deals, and expectations. She didn't look at Daniel at first. Why would she? To her, he was part of the background, part of the system that kept everything running without ever being seen. The manager approached her quickly, voice shifting into polished professionalism. Miss Sterling, welcome. We've just had a minor issue, nothing that will affect your stay. She nodded once, eyes scanning the lobby with practiced efficiency, until something small and almost invisible, pulled her gaze just slightly to the left. A man in a janitor's uniform, a name still hanging faintly in the air. Daniel Hayes. Her steps slowed. Not enough for anyone else to notice, just enough for time to stretch in a way that didn't belong to anyone but her. What was his name? She asked quietly. The manager blinked, caught off guard. Oh, him? Just the janitor, Daniel Hayes. And for the first time since she entered, Victoria Sterling stopped completely, the confidence in her posture holding, but something behind her eyes shifting, like a memory unlocking, like a truth stepping forward without permission, and in that single suspended second, before anyone understood why, the room began to feel smaller, quieter, as if it were preparing to listen. The manager let out a short, uneasy laugh, trying to recover the moment as if it were nothing more than a minor pause in an otherwise flawless performance. But Victoria did not laugh. She did not move. She simply kept her eyes on the man standing a few yards away, the man who had already returned to his quiet rhythm, the slow glide of the mop across marble, the kind of movement that asked for nothing and expected even less. And yet something about it did not fit the image in her mind, something about the stillness, the control, the absence of reaction. It was not the stillness of someone small. It was the stillness of someone who had already measured the room and found no need to prove anything within it. Daniel Hayes, she repeated, softer this time, as if testing the weight of the name against a memory that refused to stay buried. The manager shifted beside her, lowering his voice, eager to smooth things over. Yes, ma'am, just a janitor. We had a bit of confusion. With a guest complaint, nothing serious. I assure you it is being handled. He smiled the way people smile when they believe the story is already decided. Victoria did not respond right away. 2 seconds passed, then 3, the kind of silence that stretches just enough for people to notice, but not enough for them to understand. Around them, the lobby continued its quiet performance, glasses clinking, soft music drifting, conversations resuming in cautious tones, but there was a subtle shift now. a thread of attention pulling toward the center, toward the man who was no longer entirely invisible. Daniel finished a stroke of the mop and paused, just briefly, his eyes lifting again, not to challenge, not to question, but simply to acknowledge the presence now fixed on him. Their eyes met for less than a second. It was enough. Victoria felt it, a recognition that did not belong to this place, to this moment, to this version of him. "Look at me," she said, not loudly, but clearly enough that the words carried. The manager blinked again, confused, but Daniel obeyed without hesitation, straightening, his posture calm, his expression unchanged, and in that stillness there was something almost unsettling, something that did not match the narrative everyone else had already accepted. "Have we met before?" she asked. The question hung in the air, simple on the surface, but layered with something deeper, something searching. A few nearby guests turned fully now, curiosity replacing amusement, the energy of the room tightening like a held breath. Daniel did not answer immediately. 3 short beats of silence followed, measured, deliberate. Then he spoke. "No, ma'am," he said, his voice steady, respectful, but not submissive. 2 slower seconds passed, the sound of the fountain near the entrance suddenly louder, the hum of the air conditioning filling the space between them. Then a shift, subtle but undeniable, crossed Victoria's face, not doubt, not confusion, something closer to realization, as if the answer she received was not the one she expected, but the one she needed to hear to confirm what she already knew. She took a step closer, not toward a janitor, toward a name that refused to stay small. And somewhere behind them, the laughter that had once felt easy now felt misplaced, like it no longer belonged in the same room. The manager cleared his throat, forcing a polite smile that no longer felt convincing, his fingers tightening slightly around the folder in his hand, as if control could be restored with posture alone. "Sir, if there is anything else, we can escort him out and resolve this privately," he said, his tone carefully measured, but the edge of urgency had crept in. Daniel did not move. He did not step back, did not step forward. He simply stood there, shoulders relaxed, eyes steady. The same quiet presence that had gone unnoticed minutes ago, now holding a weight no one could quite explain. Victoria did not look at the manager. She kept her gaze fixed on Daniel, searching, not for confirmation, but for alignment, as if she was trying to match the man in front of her with something etched into memory years ago. "You said no," she continued, her voice softer now, but sharper in intent, "but your eyes do not agree." A few people closer to the scene shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether they were witnessing a misunderstanding or something far more significant. The room felt different now, less like a lobby and more like a place waiting for a truth to surface. Daniel inhaled slowly, not visibly, not dramatically, just enough to mark a transition from silence to choice. "I have worked in many places, ma'am," he said, his tone even, respectful, each word placed with care, "met many people along the way." 3 short sentences, simple, controlled. 2 seconds of stillness followed, the soft splash of the fountain echoing again, the faint hum of distant conversation fading further into the background. Then something shifted. Victoria's expression changed, not into surprise, but into certainty, the kind that arrives quietly but does not leave. "Not many," she said, taking another step closer, her heels softer now against the marble. "Only one who walked away when everyone else stayed." The manager frowned, confused, glancing between them as if trying to piece together a conversation he was not meant to understand. "Hey." Guest nearby lowered his glass slowly, eyes narrowing, curiosity replacing judgment. Daniel's gaze flickered, just once, a small movement that might have gone unnoticed by anyone else, but not by her. It was enough. 10 years ago, she continued, her voice steady, no longer questioning, now remembering. A boardroom on the 32nd floor, a deal everyone said was impossible, and one man who said it was not about numbers, it was about people. The air tightened again, the words carrying further than they should have, drawing more attention, more silence. Daniel said nothing. He did not deny it. He did not claim it. He simply stood there, the same quiet man in a uniform that suddenly felt like a disguise no one had thought to question. 2 slow seconds passed. Then one sentence, barely above a whisper, but strong enough to change everything. That was a long time ago. Victoria exhaled, a breath she had not realized she was holding, and in that moment the certainty settled fully into place. No, she said, her voice calm, grounded, undeniable. It was the moment everything I have now began. The manager's smile disappeared completely. The room did not laugh anymore, and for the first time since the moment began, the man they had dismissed as invisible no longer felt small at all. The manager took a step back now, no longer leading the moment, but trying to stay out of its path, his earlier confidence fading into something quieter, something uncertain. I think there may be some confusion, he said, his voice lower, careful, as if volume alone could undo what had already begun. Victoria did not turn toward him. She remained focused on Daniel, her posture no longer that of a distant executive, but of someone standing face to face with a past that refused to stay buried. You disappeared, she said, each word deliberate, measured, carrying a weight that did not belong to this lobby. No announcement, no explanation, just gone. 3 short sentences, each landing heavier than the last. A few heads turned more fully now, conversations dissolving completely, the background noise thinning into near silence. Daniel lowered his gaze slightly, not in shame, not in defeat, but in reflection, as if the words had opened a door he had long chosen to keep closed. Some things matter more than staying, he replied, his tone calm, steady, unshaken. 2 slower seconds followed, the soft echo of footsteps from a distant hallway, the faint hum of the chandelier above, details suddenly sharper in the stillness. Then a shift. Victoria's expression softened, not with pity, but with understanding that had taken years to arrive. You told them no, she continued, her voice quieter now, almost personal, when everyone else said yes, when the numbers looked right, when the risk seemed small. The manager glanced at a nearby colleague, confusion written plainly across his face, as if he had stepped into a story already halfway told. Daniel remained still. He did not interrupt. He did not correct. He allowed the truth to unfold in its own time. You said it would cost people their jobs, she added. One more sentence, one more piece falling into place. A soft murmur rippled through the small crowd that had gathered, not loud, but enough to signal a shift from judgment to attention. 2 seconds of silence followed. Then one sentence, simple, grounded. It was not worth it, Daniel said. Victoria nodded slowly, her gaze never leaving his. It would have destroyed the company, she said, her voice steady now, carrying not doubt but certainty. And I did not understand that until after you were gone. The air seemed to settle around them, the tension no longer sharp, but deep, like something finally being seen clearly. The manager's posture changed again, shoulders tightening, as if the weight of the situation was beginning to press in. Sir, he said carefully, stepping forward again, if there is anything we need to address, we can handle it through proper channels. His words sounded smaller now, procedural, out of place in a moment that had already moved beyond policies and protocols. Daniel finally looked at him, not with anger, not with superiority, but with a calm acknowledgement that did not challenge and did not retreat. Then he returned his gaze to Victoria. 3 short words followed, quiet but firm. It is all right. 2 slower seconds passed, the room holding steady, waiting. Then the shift that changed everything. Victoria straightened, her shoulders settling into a different kind of authority, one not built on distance, but on recognition. No, she said, her voice clear, carrying across the lobby without effort. It is not. And in that moment, the balance of the room shifted completely, not because someone raised their voice, but because the truth had finally found its place. The words settled into the room with a quiet authority that did not need to be repeated, and for a moment no one moved, not the guests, not the staff, not even the manager who had once stood so confidently at the center of attention, because something had shifted beyond control, beyond explanation, into a space where truth no longer asked for permission. Victoria took another step forward, closing the distance not as a superior, but as someone who understood exactly what that distance had once cost. You walked away from everything, she said, her voice steady but softer now, each word carrying respect that had not been there before. Position, recognition, influence, all of it. 3 short statements, clear and grounded. Daniel did not respond immediately. He stood as he had from the beginning, composed, quiet, the weight of the past resting on him without bending him. 2 seconds passed, the faint sound of a bell at the reception desk echoing somewhere behind them, distant, irrelevant. Then he spoke. "I chose something else," he said simply. No explanation, no defense, just a truth that did not require detail. A few guests exchanged glances, their earlier amusement now replaced with something closer to reflection, as if they were beginning to understand that the man they had dismissed was never what they assumed. Victoria nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving his. "Your daughter," she said, not as a question, but as a realization that had taken time to reach the surface. The name was not spoken, but the meaning was clear. Daniel's expression shifted, just slightly, a softness breaking through the stillness, the first sign of something personal, something protected. "She needed me," he replied, his voice just as calm, but now carrying a different kind of strength, one rooted in choice rather than circumstance. 2 slower seconds followed, the kind that allow a room to breathe again. But this time the air felt different, heavier with understanding. The manager stepped forward once more, his voice careful, almost cautious now. "Ms. Sterling, if there has been some kind of misunderstanding, we can review his employment file, make adjustments if necessary," he offered, his words procedural, safe, as if the situation could be resolved with forms and policies. Victoria turned to him then, not sharply, not with anger, but with a clarity that left no room for interpretation. "There is no misunderstanding," she said, her tone even, controlled, but firm enough to carry across the space. 3 short words followed. He was right. The manager froze, his prepared response fading before it could form. 2 seconds of silence stretched between them, long enough for the meaning to settle, long enough for the room to recognize that the conversation had moved beyond roles and titles. Then the shift. Victoria looked back at Daniel, her posture fully aligned now, no longer divided between past and present. "Do you know what happened after you left?" she asked, her voice steady, but carrying a depth that hinted at more than business, more than decisions made in a boardroom. Daniel shook his head once, small, controlled. "I did not stay to find out," he answered. 2 slower seconds passed, the sound of the fountain returning, steady, grounding. Then the reveal began to surface, not loudly, not dramatically, but with the kind of quiet weight that changes everything. "We lost more than money," she said, her gaze unwavering. "We lost direction, we lost trust, and for a long time, we almost lost everything you tried to protect." The words hung in the air, not as accusation, but as acknowledgement. The room did not react with noise, it reacted with stillness, the kind that comes when people realize they are standing inside a moment that matters. And in that stillness, the man in the janitor uniform was no longer just part of the background. He was the reason the story had ever moved forward at all. The truth did not land with noise. It settled like weight, quiet and undeniable, pressing into every corner of the room until even the smallest movements felt out of place. And for a moment no one dared to interrupt it. Not the manager, not the guests, not even the staff who had once moved freely through the space, as if nothing here could surprise them. Victoria's words lingered, not as accusation, but as recognition, and Daniel stood within them without shifting, without reaching for anything more than what had already been said. 3 short breaths passed, measured, steady, then he spoke. "You rebuilt," he said, his tone calm, almost certain, as if the outcome had never been in doubt. 2 seconds followed, the soft echo of water from the fountain filling the space between them. Then a slight movement from Victoria, a nod, small but meaningful. "Not at first," she replied, her voice carrying a quiet honesty that did not try to protect itself. "We made mistakes, we chased numbers again, we forgot the people." 3 short admissions, each one lowering the distance between who she was then and who she had become. A guest near the front desk shifted his stance, his earlier confidence replaced with a kind of still attention, as if he had stepped into a story he did not expect to matter to him. Daniel listened, not with judgment, not with approval, just with presence, the kind that does not interrupt because it already understands. 2 slower seconds passed, the air steady, the room no longer restless but waiting. Then Victoria continued. "But your words stayed," she said, her eyes fixed on him, unwavering. Not in the reports, not in the board minutes, but in the decisions we could not ignore forever. The manager lowered his gaze slightly, the edges of his authority softening, his earlier posture replaced with something more careful, more aware. Daniel exhaled quietly, almost imperceptible, the weight of memory moving through him without resistance. Words are easy to remember, he said, his voice even, grounded. It is choices that matter. 3 short words followed. Every single time. 2 seconds of silence expanded after that, not empty, but full, the kind that carries meaning without needing explanation. Victoria's expression shifted again, not toward regret, but toward respect that had been earned long before this moment. That is why I came today, she said, her tone steady, her posture aligned with something deeper than authority, not for inspection, not for reports, but because something did not feel right. A faint murmur moved through the edges of the room, subtle, restrained, as if people were beginning to understand that this was no longer about a hotel, or a position, or a mistake made minutes ago. Daniel tilted his head slightly, a small acknowledgement, not questioning, not surprised. And now you know, he replied, his voice quiet, but carrying enough clarity to settle the moment further. 2 slower seconds passed, the chandelier above casting soft reflections across the marble floor, the light steady, unchanged, even as everything else shifted. Then the turning point. Victoria stepped forward one more time, closing the last space between them, not as someone above, but as someone who had finally caught up to a truth that had never moved. No, she said, her voice calm, certain, now I remember. And in that moment, the room did not just listen. It understood that what had been forgotten was never lost. It had only been waiting for the right name to be spoken again. The words lingered longer than expected, not because they were loud, but because they were true, and truth has a way of slowing everything down until even the smallest detail feels significant, until even silence becomes part of the conversation. Daniel did not step back when she moved closer, but he did not step forward either. He simply remained where he was, grounded, steady, as if he had already accepted whatever this moment needed to become. 3 short seconds passed, quiet, deliberate. Then he spoke. Remembering does not change the past, he said, his voice calm, even, without bitterness, without weight beyond what was already carried. 2 slower seconds followed, the faint sound of a suitcase rolling across the far end of the lobby, distant, almost unreal compared to the stillness here. Then a shift. Victoria nodded once, not in disagreement, but in understanding. No, she replied, her tone steady, but it changes what we do next. 3 short words followed. That matters more. A guest near the elevator lowered his phone, no longer pretending to check messages, his attention fully drawn into the moment unfolding before him. The manager stood just behind, no longer leading, no longer correcting, simply present, his earlier certainty replaced by something quieter, something closer to awareness. Daniel considered her words, not visibly, not dramatically, but in the way his eyes held steady, in the way his posture remained unchanged, as if decisions for him were never rushed, never forced. 2 seconds passed, then another. I am not here for what comes next, he said, his voice measured, respectful, but firm enough to settle any assumption before it could grow. The sentence landed softly, but clearly, like a boundary drawn without resistance. Victoria did not react immediately. She did not argue, did not press. She simply watched him, the same way she had watched him years ago when he spoke in a room full of people who did not understand him then either. 3 short breaths passed. Then she answered. I know, she said, her voice quieter now, more personal than before. You never were. 2 slower seconds followed. The light from the chandelier, catching in the polished floor, reflecting both of them in a way that blurred titles and roles into something simpler, something human. Then the turning point deepened. But I am, she continued, her posture shifting again, not into authority, but into intention, and I will not ignore this. A subtle ripple moved through the room, not noise, not reaction, but awareness spreading from one person to another, as if everyone present understood that something irreversible had just begun. Daniel's expression did not change, but there was a pause now, a space where his silence held more than before, not resistance, not hesitation, but consideration. 2 seconds stretched. Then he spoke again. "Do not turn this into something it is not," he said, his tone calm, grounded, protective not of himself, but of the meaning behind what had already been revealed. 3 short words followed. It was enough. The room held that sentence differently, not as an ending, but as something complete in itself. Victoria's gaze softened, but did not weaken. "For you," she replied, steady, clear, maybe. 2 slower seconds passed, the air still, the moment balanced. Then the quiet twist. "But not for me." And in that single sentence, the direction of everything shifted again, not louder, not bigger, but deeper, as if the story was no longer about what had been done, but about what could no longer be left undone. The sentence did not echo. It settled, quiet and immovable, and for a moment even the air seemed to pause around it, as if the room itself understood that something deeper had just been claimed. Daniel did not respond right away, not because he did not have an answer, but because he chose his silence the same way he chose his words, carefully, deliberately, without the need to fill space that did not require it. 3 short seconds passed, the faint hum of the building returning just enough to remind everyone that the world outside this moment still existed. Then he spoke. "What you do with it is your decision," he said, his tone even, steady, free of expectation. 2 slower seconds followed, the soft reflection of light shifting across the marble floor, the stillness holding. Then a shift. Victoria inhaled quietly, not sharply, not dramatically, just enough to mark a change, a line crossed not in authority, but in responsibility. "It already is," she replied, her voice calm, grounded, carrying a clarity that did not need to rise to be heard. 3 short words followed. "Starting right now." The manager stiffened slightly, the meaning of her tone reaching him before the words fully settled, his earlier posture of control replaced by a quiet tension, as if he could feel the ground shifting beneath a structure he once understood. A few guests glanced at one another, no longer amused, no longer detached, but present, aware, witnesses to something they had not expected to matter. Daniel remained still, his expression unchanged, his presence steady, the same quiet center he had been from the beginning. 2 seconds passed, then 1 sentence. "This place is yours to lead," he said, not as permission, not as challenge, but as acknowledgement of what already existed. Victoria nodded once, slowly, accepting the weight of that truth without hesitation. "And I intend to," she answered, her voice firm now, not louder, but more certain, more aligned with something that had been waiting beneath the surface. 3 short breaths followed, measured, controlled. Then she turned, not away from him entirely, but just enough to face the room, the staff, the structure that had allowed something small to grow into something visible. The manager straightened instinctively, uncertain whether to step forward or remain still, caught between habit and a new reality he did not yet understand. "We will correct this," she said, her tone clear, not harsh, not accusatory, but undeniable. 2 slower seconds passed, the words moving through the space, settling into every corner. Then the shift that made it real. "Not because of a mistake," she continued, her eyes briefly returning to Daniel, "but because we forgot what matters." The room held that sentence differently, not as instruction, but as truth being restored. Daniel lowered his gaze slightly, not withdrawing, not avoiding, but releasing the moment from his side, as if he had already given what needed to be given. 3 short words followed. "That is enough." 2 seconds of silence stretched again, deeper now, more complete. Then Victoria spoke once more, softer, but stronger than before. "No," she said, her voice steady, unwavering. "It is where we begin." And in that quiet declaration, the story did not end. It shifted forward, not with noise, not with spectacle, but with a clarity that made everything that came next impossible to ignore. The words did not fade when she said them. They anchored themselves into the space. And for the first time since the moment began, the room did not feel like it was waiting for something else. It felt like it was standing inside something that had already changed. Daniel did not respond immediately, his hands resting lightly on the handle of the mop, his posture still, grounded, unchanged, as if the shift around him did not require him to move at all. 3 short seconds passed, quiet, steady. Then he spoke. "Then lead it well," he said, his tone calm, without pressure, without expectation, just a simple statement placed where it belonged. 2 slower seconds followed, the faint sound of the front doors opening and closing somewhere behind them, the outside world brushing briefly against this moment before slipping away again. Then a shift. Victoria nodded once, not as acknowledgement of authority, but as acceptance of responsibility that could no longer be deferred. "I will," she replied, her voice even, aligned, carrying a quiet strength that had not been there when she first entered the room. 3 short words followed. "I owe that." The manager shifted again, his earlier certainty now replaced with a careful awareness, his eyes moving between them as if trying to understand where he now stood in a structure that no longer felt familiar. A staff member near the concierge desk straightened unconsciously, the ripple of change moving outward in small, almost invisible ways. Daniel lowered his gaze briefly, not retreating, but releasing, as if the part he needed to play in this moment had already been fulfilled. 2 seconds passed. Then 1 sentence. "You do not owe me anything," he said, his voice steady, grounded in something deeper than the moment itself. The words landed gently, but they carried a clarity that reshaped the air around them. Victoria exhaled softly, a breath that carried both acknowledgement and quiet resistance. "Maybe not," she answered, her tone measured, "but I owe what you stood for." 3 short statements followed, each one deliberate. People, integrity, choice. 2 slower seconds passed, the chandelier light reflecting across the floor, catching in the edges of stillness that now filled the space. Then the shift that brought everything into focus. She turned slightly, her attention widening beyond Daniel, beyond the moment, toward the room that had witnessed everything without understanding it until now. "This hotel will reflect that," she said, her voice clear, not raised, but undeniable, not in appearance, but in how we treat every person who walks through these doors. A subtle movement passed through the staff, not loud, not immediate, but real, as if something long ignored had just been called back into place. Daniel remained still, his expression unchanged, but there was a quiet finality in his presence now, as if he was already stepping away from something that no longer required him. 3 short words followed. "That is good." 2 seconds of silence stretched once more, softer this time, not heavy, not tense, but complete. Then the quiet turn. Victoria looked back at him, her gaze steady, not searching anymore, but certain. "Will you stay?" she asked, the question simple, but carrying more than it appeared to hold. The room held its breath again, not out of tension, but out of recognition that the answer would not just belong to him. It would define what this moment truly meant. And Daniel, standing exactly where he had been from the beginning, did not answer right away. The question did not rush the air, it settled into it, soft but undeniable, and for a moment everything else faded again, not out of tension, but out of respect for what was being asked. Daniel remained still, his hands resting lightly where they had always been, his posture unchanged, but something in his eyes shifted, not toward uncertainty, but toward something deeper, something that had already been decided long before this moment arrived. 3 short seconds passed, quiet, measured, then he spoke. "I already stayed," he said, his voice calm, grounded, without hesitation. 2 slower seconds followed, the faint sound of a distant elevator bell echoing softly through the lobby, the world continuing just beyond the edges of this stillness. Then a shift. Victoria's expression changed, not into confusion, but into understanding that arrived in pieces, each one aligning with the next. "Not here," she replied gently, her tone steady. "Not like this." 3 short words followed. "Not unseen." The manager glanced between them again, his earlier confidence now completely replaced with silence, as if even he understood that this moment no longer belonged to procedure or position. Daniel lowered his gaze briefly, not in retreat, but in reflection, the weight of years moving quietly through him without resistance. 2 seconds passed. Then 1 sentence. "This is where I am needed," he said, his voice even, not defensive, not proud, just certain in a way that did not require approval. The words landed softly, but they held their place. Victoria exhaled slowly, a breath that carried both respect and something unresolved, something that had not yet found its answer. "You could do more," she said, not as pressure, but as recognition of something she had already seen before. 3 short statements followed. Lead again. Build again. Change more than this. 2 slower seconds passed, the chandelier lights steady above them, reflecting across a space that no longer felt the same. Then the turning point. Daniel lifted his eyes to meet hers fully this time, not briefly, not in passing, but with a clarity that matched her own. "More is not always better," he said, his tone calm, unwavering. "Sometimes it is just louder." The room held that sentence differently, not as resistance, but as truth placed exactly where it belonged. A guest near the entrance nodded slightly without realizing it, as if something inside him had aligned without permission. Victoria studied Daniel for a moment longer, not searching now, not questioning, but seeing him as he was, not as he had been, not as he could be, but as he had chosen to be. 3 short breaths passed. Then she nodded once, slowly, accepting something that could not be changed by position or power. "Then stay," she said quietly, her voice softer now, but stronger in its acceptance, but not invisible. 2 seconds of silence followed, gentle now, no longer heavy. Then the quiet twist. Daniel's expression softened just slightly, the smallest shift, almost imperceptible, but enough to carry meaning. "I was never invisible," he said, his voice calm, certain, only unnoticed. And in that moment, the room understood that what had changed was not the man standing before them. It was the way they had chosen to see him. The sentence did not end the moment. It revealed it. And for a few quiet seconds no one spoke, not because they did not have words, but because they finally understood that words were no longer the most important thing in the room. Daniel stood exactly as he had from the beginning, calm, steady, unchanged, but now there was no confusion about what that stillness meant. It was not absence, it was presence without noise. 3 short seconds passed, the soft hum of the lobby returning just enough to remind everyone that time had not stopped, even if it had slowed. Then Victoria spoke. "That was our mistake," she said, her voice measured, not defensive, not distant, but grounded in something honest. "We only valued what we could see." 3 short statements followed. Titles, positions, appearances. 2 slower seconds passed, the words settling into the space, reshaping it quietly. Then a shift. She turned slightly toward the staff, her gaze moving across them not as an inspection, but as recognition, as if she was seeing them for the first time beyond their roles. The manager lowered his eyes, his earlier confidence replaced with something more reflective, something closer to humility. Daniel watched this without reaction, not because it did not matter, but because he did not need it to. 2 seconds passed. Then 1 sentence. "People show you who they are every day," he said, his voice calm. "Even, you just have to notice." The sentence moved through the room gently, but it stayed, settling into the quiet space that had opened. A staff member near the reception desk straightened slightly, as if the words had reached her directly, as if she had been seen without being named. Victoria nodded once, slowly, her understanding no longer forming, but complete. "Then we will notice," she said, her tone clear, not as a promise made lightly, but as a standard being set. 3 short words followed. "Starting with this." 2 slower seconds passed, the light reflecting across the floor, steady, unchanged, grounding the moment in something real. Then the turning point deepened. She looked back at Daniel, her expression no longer searching, no longer uncertain, but resolved. "You did not need a title to lead," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "And we did not need to wait this long to learn that." The room held that truth without resistance now, without the earlier tension, as if it had found its place naturally. Daniel's gaze softened slightly, not in reaction, but in acknowledgement, the smallest shift carrying meaning without needing to expand. 3 short words followed. "It happens often." 2 seconds of silence stretched, gentle now, almost peaceful. Then the final shift. Victoria took a small step back, not away from him, but into her role, her posture aligning once more with leadership, but now shaped by something deeper than authority alone. "Not anymore," she said, her voice steady, certain, carrying across the room without force. Not here. And in that quiet declaration, the room did not respond with applause or noise. It responded with stillness, the kind that comes when something real has been understood, the kind that does not need to be announced because everyone already feels it. The words did not call for applause. They settled into something deeper, something that reshaped the room without asking permission. And for a moment, no one moved because there was nothing left to perform, nothing left to prove. Daniel stood where he had always stood, not elevated, not diminished, simply present, the same quiet center that had carried him through years no one here had seen. 3 short seconds passed, steady, grounded. Then he reached for the mop again, his hands returning to motion as if the moment had already completed its purpose. The soft sound of the mop gliding across marble broke the stillness, not as disruption, but as continuation, a reminder that dignity does not pause for recognition. 2 slower seconds followed, the light above reflecting in clean lines across the floor, the space now holding a different kind of clarity. Victoria watched him for a moment longer, not expecting more, not asking for more, but understanding that what mattered had already been given. "Thank you," she said, her voice quiet, not formal, not distant, but real, the kind of gratitude that does not seek acknowledgement. 3 short words followed. "For walking away." The sentence lingered, not as a question, but as respect for a choice few would have made. Daniel did not look up right away. He finished the motion in front of him, slow, deliberate. Then he paused, lifting his eyes just enough to meet hers once more. "For staying," he corrected gently, his tone calm, steady, without emphasis. 2 seconds passed, the correction settling into the space, shifting the meaning without force. Victoria nodded, accepting it fully, her expression no longer carrying doubt, only understanding. The manager stepped forward slightly, then stopped, as if unsure where he belonged now. His earlier authority replaced with something quieter, something learning its place again. Around them, the staff moved differently, not faster, not slower, but with awareness, as if each small action now carried weight it did not have before. 3 short breaths passed. Then Victoria turned to the room once more, not to command, but to affirm. "We do better," she said, her voice clear, grounded, carrying through the space without effort. 3 short words followed. "Starting today." 2 slower seconds passed, the sentence settling into every corner, not as instruction, but as standard. Daniel lowered his gaze again, returning to his work, not out of dismissal, but because the moment no longer required his presence in the center of it. The story had already moved beyond him, exactly as he had intended. The room did not return to what it was before. It did not fill with noise. It did not rush back into routine. Instead, it held a quiet respect, a shared understanding that something simple had revealed something true. And in that stillness, without announcement, without ceremony, the man who had once been overlooked continued his work, not changed, not transformed, but finally seen, while the world around him adjusted to a truth that had been there all along. The lobby did not return to noise. It returned to something quieter, something more aware, as if every movement now carried intention where before it had only carried habit. And in the center of it all, Daniel continued, not as a symbol, not as a story, but as himself, steady, present, unchanged in the ways that mattered most. 3 short moments passed, the soft glide of the mop, the faint echo of footsteps, the quiet hum of a place learning to listen. No one laughed now. No one whispered. They simply watched, not with curiosity, but with respect that had arrived without announcement. 2 slower seconds followed, the light from the chandeliers reflecting in clean lines across the floor, the same floor he had cleaned 100 times before, but now seen differently, now understood. Victoria remained where she stood for a moment longer, not commanding, not correcting, but observing, allowing the truth of what had just happened to settle fully into the space she was responsible for. Then she turned, not away from him, but forward, carrying that understanding into every step she would take from this moment on. "We remember," she said quietly, not to the room, but into it, as if the walls themselves needed to hear it. 3 short words followed. "Every single day." The sentence did not echo, it anchored, grounding something deeper than policy, deeper than procedure. The manager nodded once, slowly, not because he was told to, but because he finally understood what had been missing. Around them, the staff moved with a different rhythm, not forced, not instructed, but aware, each glance, each action carrying a new kind of attention. Daniel finished another pass across the marble and paused, not for recognition, not for acknowledgement, but because the work itself had reached its natural stopping point. He lifted his eyes once more, not searching, not expecting, simply seeing the room as it now was, quieter, steadier, more honest. 3 short words followed, spoken only for himself, but carrying weight nonetheless. This is enough. 2 seconds of silence stretched, soft, complete, the kind that does not ask for more. Then he turned, not dramatically, not slowly, just naturally, and began to move toward the next section of the floor, the next simple task, the next quiet moment that would never make headlines but would always matter. No one stopped him. No one needed to. The story had already spoken. And in that final stillness, where no voice tried to rise above another, where no title tried to claim the moment, the truth remained, simple and unshaken, that dignity does not announce itself, it reveals itself, and when it does, the only honest response is silence.